The Super Bowl, the ultimate goal of every NFL team at the end of February. Every decade has had one that you could say that defined that decade. Super Bowl III in '69 when Joe Namath guaranteed victory against the Colts. '79, the clash of the first two true dynasties, when the Steelers beat the defending Super Bowl champion Cowboys in Super Bowl XIII. The birth of Joe Montana's legacy in '82 over the Bengals. '90s are a little tougher, but I'd have to go with '91, when the Buffalo Bills started their 4 back-to-back Super Bowl losing streak against the Giants. The birth of the evil empire in '02 when the greatest show on turf ran into Bill Belichick's brick wall. The one I wanted to talk about today is the one that defined the 2010s. It intersects with so many storylines, some still taking place today. So, let's jump right into Super Bowl 49. Hello everyone, I am Nicobolas, and yes, my personality does go a little deeper than music and simping for Austin Dickey.
Why did you leave, Dad?
I've always been a huge football fan and take great interest in the history of the NFL, and one day, I was thinking about how fun Super Bowl 49 was to watch, before I decided to look a little deeper into it. Just the way it shaped the rest of the decade afterwards in the football world has been overlooked. So I wanted to take a look into some storylines and how they played out afterwards. Starting with the Seattle Sea Chickens. The Seahawks. Yeah. Just looking at the surface level, the Seahawks were on top of the world, looking to start their dynasty. The Legion of Boom just kicked the living crap out of Peyton Manning and the Broncos in the Super Bowl prior. Pete Carroll turned a team around that had gone 5-11 before his hiring, just a few years prior. And Russell Wilson was an up-and-coming superstar that was looking to build upon what he did the year prior. Despite the departure of slot corners Walter Thurman and Brandon Browner, the Legion of Boom continued to dominate the league. The defense as a whole was worth fearing, as they were on top of the league, on top of the offense also being near the top as well. Marshawn Lynch did what he did best and bulldozed through people for 1,300 yards, 13 touchdowns, and a Pro Bowl nod. Wilson built upon what he had done the previous 2 seasons, continuing his trend of throwing for more yards every year and throwing his, at the time, fewest interceptions. This all culminated in a 12-4 record and the first seed. One of the most interesting storylines of the Seahawks doesn't take form until the conference championship. The story of Chris Matthews' contribution to the Seahawks is quite short, and it basically lasts between the conference championship and the Super Bowl. His contribution before this was basically a tackle on special teams at the end of the regular season, and he spent most of the year on the practice squad before being moved to the active roster on December 6th. In the conference championship, he caught the onside kick right before they took a 3-point lead against the Packers in the 4th. Granted, the Packers would end up sending it to overtime, but they ended up losing that game on the opening drive. Then, in the Super Bowl, he was given his time to shine, as he led the team with 4 catches for 109 yards and a touchdown. But that's where we'll leave the Seahawks for now and move on to the evil empire known as the Patriots. The narrative surrounding the Patriots at this time was very much different than when it was 5 years prior, or even 5 years later, and I think we tend to forget about it. We've always thought of them as this dominant force that was always going to be the Super Bowl favorites, but this was an end of an era where there was a 6-year gap between their last 2 Super Bowl appearances. Imagine, thinking that's a long time, but that's forever for a Patriots fan.
It's been so long since we've won a Super Bowl! 4 years! 4!
Both of which were losses to the New York Giants, and it had been 10 years since their last victory. So going into this year, there was the atmosphere that they were nothing but regular season winners. Part of that was due to Darth Vader himself, Tom Brady. His passing stats took a bit of a dip at this point in time, and he was taking a bit of a beating, which is not something you want for your aging quarterback in his 30s. Oh yeah, he was in his late 30s at this time, and people were talking about retirement. Oh, how innocent we were. Not to say it was bad or anything. As a whole, the offense kept chugging along, remaining in top 10 in most stats, carrying a bit of a middle-of-the-road defense. Defense has some names on it that are very noteworthy. Darrelle Revis, just a few years removed from his Revis Island era. Brandon Browner, 1 year removed from his PED suspension that caused him to miss out on being part of the Super Bowl, where the Seahawks obliterated the Broncos. Wonder if he at all has a big effect on this game. This was also the year they added Patrick Chung back from the Eagles. They also had rising star Dante Hightower, and holding down the line was the man who caused the butt fumble himself, Vince Wilfork. This all culminated in a team that went 12-4, but it all started a little bit rough, being 2-2 and one of those losses being an absolute rout at the hand of the Kansas City Chiefs, losing 41-14, but they chugged right along.
You're on to Cincinnati.
Bouncing back with 7 straight wins, putting up at least 27 points in those 7 games. Heading into the Super Bowl, the road was a shootout with the Ravens and an absolute stomping of the Colts. Now here's where people usually make a Deflategate joke, but that fruit hangs so much lower than making fun of Packers fans for suffering heartbreaking losses at the end of the year. Sorry, Packers fans. No, I'm not. Anyways, that leads us into the game itself. This game started off as all Patriots Super Bowls have, quite slow. With a scoreless first quarter and only 20 in-game minutes in, the Patriots struck first with a Tom Brady pass to Brandon LaFell, who had been signed to the team just that offseason. The Seahawks would respond 7 minutes later with a Marshawn Lynch touchdown run, just for Brady to toss a touchdown to Gronk just a minute and a half later. And shortly after, Wilson threw one of his own to Chris Matthews with 2 seconds left in the half. It was a strong back and forth for a hot minute. Now, if the first half seemed fair and balanced, the second half was the opposite of that, with both teams taking over the scoreboard for a quarter. The Seahawks took over the third quarter, scoring a touchdown and a field goal before the end of it. That's 17 unanswered points for them. I'd say the Pats' offense looked a little dead if it wasn't for them scoring 29 seconds before the unanswered points started. It would take a bit into the fourth before the Patriots would respond, with Brady tossing his third touchdown to Danny Amendola. The Seahawks would respond to this touchdown with a 4-play drive that only gained 5 yards before punting. And then Tom Brady does what Tom Brady does best, pick apart defenses with precision, going 8 for 8 in a 64-yard drive where he threw his 4th touchdown to wait, that's Julian Edelman. Whoops. Wrong one of Tom Brady's white slot receivers. Anywho. The score is now 28-24 Patriots with 2:06 to go. Russell Wilson would then start a methodical drive of his own, starting off 3 for 5 and 75 yards, taking them down to the 5 of the Pats. First play, kind of a no-brainer. Hand it to Marshawn Lynch, kill some clock, because, there's a minute and 6 left, and last thing you want to do is give the ball back to Brady with a whole minute left to either tie the game or win it. And it almost worked. They got 4 yards out and burnt 40 seconds off the clock before the next snap. I think everyone who's a sports fan knows about what happens next, and have heard it broken down 100 times, or have torn the Seahawks apart for their decision. So, I just want to focus on a couple parts of this play. The bunch to the right of the play consists of Seahawks, Ricardo Lockett, or Jermaine Kearse. Patriots on this side of the field are Brandon Browner and Malcolm Butler. As the play starts, we can see former teammates Kearse and Browner giving each other a brotherly hug, whilst Butler, reading the play the split second he sees Kearse engaging Browner, breaks right for where he knows Wilson is going to place the ball. And one of the most memorable calls by Al Michaels is made, sealing the game for the Patriots.
Pass is intercepted at the goal line by Malcolm Butler. Unreal.
After the interception, the Pats would kneel the game out, and the rest of the decade would see them dominate the league, even more than what they did at the beginning of the Brady-Belichick era. Next year, they would end up losing the conference championship to the eventual champion Broncos, before going to the next 3 Super Bowls, winning 2 of them. It's insane to think of a team going to 4 Super Bowls in a 5-year span and winning 3 of them. Hell, it's even more insane to think that they went to 6 in 10 years and 10 in 20. As for the Seahawks, they have not seen the success they were expecting to have. What could have been the start of a dynasty has been a bit rocky since. They would make the playoffs the next 2 years, losing the divisional rounds to the eventual NFC champions of those playoffs. They would make it to the playoffs for the next 6 years, only winning a single playoff game in that time. The Legion of Boom would officially be disbanded by 2020. Pete Carroll is still around, but one of the biggest stories is Russell Wilson. He had some pretty good years in 15, 16, 19, and 20, but dealing with an injury in 2021 that he would return to too early for was not a good look. That down year led to his trade to the Broncos, where he's dealt with even more turmoil. But it does seem to look up for the Seahawks, as they're crafting a team that could potentially be a reoccurring team in the playoffs, even though they wouldn't have made it into the playoffs in 2022 if the Lions didn't win out of spite against the Packers. So overall, a lot of stuff going on in this game, and it caused some shockwaves in the NFL. making it one of the most memorable and important ones in recent years. But what do you think? Is there one more decade-defining for the 2010s? Like Baltimore over the Niners, or Green Bay over the Steelers? Let me know, as I'd love to hear what you think. I've been Nick Bolas, and that was the decade-defining Super Bowl of the 2010s. Peace. The Seahawks took over the third quarter. Bleh.